Christmas in that world wasn't like the Hallmark version everyone else grew up with. It wasn't soft snow on the windowsill or kids ripping open wrapping paper at 6 in the morning. It was a different kind of holiday, one wrapped in tension, hierarchy, and unspoken rules. Didn't just celebrate Christmas, you navigated it. You made sure you were seen by the right people, that you gave the right gifts, that you showed the right amount of respect without overplaying your hand. And all of this happened under the glow of Christmas lights that looked a lot brighter from the outside than they ever felt from the inside. The funny thing is, even in a world built on power, favors, and a constant awareness of who sat above who on the chain, Christmas still had a way of softening the edges. Just a little. Not enough to confuse it with normal life, but enough to remind you that even men who carried the weight of the streets on their shoulders still liked a good meal, a good laugh, and the feeling of being appreciated. But you had to understand the environment completely to appreciate how carefully every move had to be made during the holidays. Nothing was casual. Not a word, not a gesture, not a gift. The streets quieted down for a few days, but behind the scenes it was like the volume got turned up. Everybody was watching everybody. Loyalty wasn't something you spoke about, it was something you demonstrated. And Christmas was an opportunity, a moment where a man could show where he stood, who he respected, and how well he understood the dynamics of the life. If you were smart, you treated that moment with precision. If you were stupid, you treated it like an ordinary holiday and paid for the mistake later. Inside that inner circle, Christmas dinners were filled with laughter, stories, and the kind of memories that only make sense to the people who lived through them. But underneath that warmth, you could always feel the hum of the machine, the structure, the code, the awareness that even on Christmas Eve you were part of something bigger, heavier, and more dangerous than any civilian could imagine. Still, there was a charm to it, a rhythm to the way these men blended tradition with the life they chose, or the life that chose them. So when it came time to give a gift, it wasn't about walking into a store and picking out the first shiny thing that caught your eye. It was a chess move, a message, a reflection of how well you understood the man receiving it. You had to know his tastes, his preferences, what mattered to him, even what bothered him. And most importantly, you had to strike the right balance. Not too cheap, not too flashy, not too personal, unless you had that kind of relationship. It was an art form. That's why the gift I chose wasn't just a gift. It was a moment, one that captured the spirit of the season inside a world where every gesture counted. And that's where the real story begins. Now, when I say the gift wasn't just a gift, you've got to understand something about how things worked in that life. Nothing was ever purely what it looked like. Every action had layers. Every gesture had weight. A present wasn't just a box with a bow. It was a signal, a reflection of where you stood and how well you understood the man you were dealing with. When that man sat at the top, you didn't have the luxury of being casual. You had to be thoughtful, precise. You had to read the room, read the man, read the moment. I couldn't just walk into a fancy store, buy something expensive and think, yeah, he'll like this. That wasn't enough. Flash alone didn't matter. These guys were surrounded by money, surrounded by respect, surrounded by every luxury imaginable. The gift had to be deeper than that. It needed meaning. It had to say, without saying a word, that I understood him. Not just the image he put out to the world, but the gears turning underneath that image. See, in that world, the right gift could strengthen a bond. The wrong one could expose a misunderstanding, and the worst thing you could do was show that you didn't get the man you were loyal to. So I spent time thinking about it, running through different ideas, remembering little moments, comments he'd made in passing. You learn to pay attention to those things, because those throwaway lines usually reveal more about a man than the speeches he gives. I wanted something that hit the sweet spot, something that wasn't over the top but still sharp, personal without crossing into sentimental, something that showed respect but also showed that I wasn't trying to buy anything with it. In that life, the moment someone thinks you're buying favor, you're finished. The trick was giving something that felt natural, earned, appropriate, and that's where the real work began. It was like putting together a puzzle. I thought about what mattered to him beyond the surface. Not the suits, not the cars, not the spotlight he carried like a cloak. I thought about the things that made him tick, The pride, the discipline, the fierce loyalty to his people, the constant need to project strength. You had to honor all of that without flattering it. A gift that was too safe meant you didn't know him. Too personal meant you knew him too well. Too luxurious meant you were showing off. Too simple meant you didn't care. So the process of choosing became its own story. A quiet one, sure, but one that played out in my mind like a strategy session. I kept circling back to the same idea. The best gifts in that world weren't the flashiest. They were the ones that told a man, I see you exactly for who you are. And that's a rare thing in any life, never mind ours, where masks were worn more than faces. So when I finally settled on the gift, it wasn't because it was expensive or impressive on its own. It was because it carried a message, a silent one, a message about respect, understanding, and knowing the man behind the title. And that's what made it the right choice. What made that gift matter to him personally goes way beyond whatever was inside the box. With a guy like him, you had to understand the layers. The man the public saw, the sharp dresser, the guy with the perfect hair, the swagger, the headlines, was only one part of who he really was. That was the image he projected, the myth he built around himself. But underneath all that polish, there was a man who took pride in the smallest things, who noticed details, who wanted to feel understood without ever admitting he needed that from anyone. He wasn't the type to sit you down and tell you what meant something to him. He wasn't sentimental in the traditional sense. But he had this way of revealing pieces of himself in the little moments. When he talked about where he came from, or the way his old man carried himself, or the streets that shaped him long before the spotlight ever hit his face. If you listened close, you'd catch glimpses of the man behind the boss. And those glimpses were worth more than anything someone could tell you straight out. And that's why the gift mattered. It wasn't about money, and it sure as hell wasn't about showing off. It was about acknowledging the person behind the reputation. Carried himself with pride because he had to. He held on to control because that was his armor. But every now and then you'd see flashes of something softer, something
human.
A quick laugh, a memory he told without filtering it, a moment when he let the weight on his shoulders feel a little lighter. Those moments told you what was important to him, what stuck with him from his past, what he valued beyond the power and the fear and the attention. So when I chose that gift, it wasn't meant to impress him. It was meant to speak to him, to show that I understood not only the man sitting at the top of the table, but the kid he used to be, the fighter he had to become, the leader he shaped himself into. He liked strength, but he appreciated thoughtfulness in a different kind of way, something subtle, something that showed you were paying attention. Most people around him only saw the surface and tried to play to it. But the surface wasn't where the real connection was. You had to look a little deeper. That gift reflected things he didn't talk about but carried with him every day. It tapped into his pride, his history, his identity. It told him that someone actually saw him, not just the boss, not just the force of nature he was known for, but the man underneath all of that. And believe me, in that life, being understood without saying a word, that was rare. That meant something. It meant respect. It meant loyalty. It meant you were tuned into who he really was, not who the world thought he was. And that's exactly why the gift hit him the way it did. What that gift said about my role in that world had nothing to do with the wrapping paper or the price tag. It was the kind of thing that on the surface looked simple, just a Christmas present. But inside that life, every move you made reflected your place, your mindset, your understanding of the structure we all lived under. You didn't need to spell it out. You didn't need a speech. Your actions told the story for you. And the people watching were always paying attention, especially the ones at the top. I knew where I stood, and I didn't resent it. In that world, you earned your stripes not by bragging about what you could do, but by showing it day in and day out. Discipline, loyalty, consistency, those were the real currencies. And a moment like this, something as small as a holiday gift, was an opportunity to show you understood the tempo of the life. Not by kissing up, not by trying too hard, but by operating with a certain quiet confidence. A man who knows his role never has to overplay it. What I gave him wasn't about trying to climb higher or make a statement about ambition. It was about reinforcing the bond and the respect that was already there. It said, without saying anything, that I respected the position he held, and I respected the responsibilities I had. There was a balance to it all. You couldn't look weak. You couldn't look arrogant. You had to stand solid, firm enough to be trusted, humble enough to know the structure, sharp enough to prove you could handle more, if the time ever came. And the truth is, he appreciated that balance. He noticed it. He respected strength, but not recklessness. He liked loyalty, but not desperation. What he wanted were people around him who could think, who could understand the dynamics without needing everything explained, who could read a situation and act in line with the bigger picture. That gift let him know I saw the bigger picture clearly. I wasn't just giving him something. I was showing him I understood who he was, where he stood, and where I stood in relation to him. People talk a lot about loyalty in that life, but they usually talk about it the wrong way. Loyalty isn't just about taking orders or standing next to a guy. It's about recognizing the responsibility you have to the position he holds. It's about protecting the machine, the structure, the integrity of everything that keeps the whole thing running. When you give a gift in that world the right way, you're really saying, I'm aligned. I'm locked in. I understand the weight you carry, and I'm here to carry mine. And that's what the gift communicated. It wasn't loud, it wasn't flashy, but it was deliberate. And men like him, they knew the difference. They could read intention like a language, and the intention behind that gift, everything it needed to say, the hidden message behind that present, wasn't written on a card or spoken out loud. In that life, the most important things were always said in silence. You communicated through choices, through timing, through the way you carried yourself. A gift could be wrapped in paper, but the real meaning was wrapped in intention. And that was the part he paid attention to, the intention. That's what separated an empty gesture from something that carried weight. See, in our world, you couldn't just hand a man something and hope he liked it. That wasn't how it worked. A gift had to say something about your understanding of the moment, of him, of the bigger picture the two of you were operating inside. A careless gift told him you weren't paying attention. A flashy one told him you were trying too hard. But a thoughtful, precise gift, that told him you understood the language. And the language wasn't spoken. It was recognized. The message I wanted to send wasn't about power or ambition. It wasn't about trying to get closer or prove anything. The message was simple. I see you. And not in the obvious way everyone else saw him, with the reputation and the headlines and the persona he carried around like armor. I wanted him to know that I saw the man, the one behind the name, the one who came up the hard way, who fought for every inch he ever got, who built his life not out of luck, but out of grit and fire. That was the version of him I was speaking to. And that's why the gift had a quiet kind of meaning. It wasn't a token. It wasn't a tribute. It was recognition, a nod to the things he didn't talk about but lived by. It touched the part of him that valued loyalty without needing praise, respect without needing flattery, thoughtfulness without needing sentimentality. Men like him never said what mattered to them because saying it out loud made it vulnerable. But they felt it, and they read meaning like most people read newspapers, quickly, accurately, and completely. There was also another layer to the message, a message about steadiness, reliability, consistency, the kind of things you couldn't fake in that world. The gift said, you can trust me to know the temperature, to move in step, to understand where the lines are, and stay on the right side of them. You didn't want to be the guy who misread the room. You wanted to be the guy who understood the rhythm without needing anyone to clap it out for you. That was the kind of person he kept close. Men who could think, who could feel out a situation, who could move with instinct and precision. So the hidden message wasn't hidden to him. He saw it right away. He understood that the gift wasn't about the holiday, or the object, or the moment. It was about awareness, insight, respect. It was about telling him, without a single spoken word, that I wasn't just in the life. I understood the life. And more importantly, I understood him. And that's why the message landed exactly the way I intended it to. In the end, what that whole moment really showed was something most people, on the outside, never understand. In a world built on strength, fear, and reputation, the smallest gestures can carry the heaviest meaning. People think the life runs on big moves, on violence, on money, on those headline-grabbing moments they make documentaries about. But the truth is, the life runs on relationships, It runs on trust. It runs on a kind of unspoken currency that gets exchanged through everyday actions, and sometimes through something as simple as a Christmas gift. A gift in that world could never just be a holiday tradition. It wasn't about being festive or polite. It was about signaling something deeper, who you aligned with, who you respected, who you understood. Every man in that circle knew the difference between a gift given out of obligation and one given with intention. You could feel it the second it hit your hands. And the right gift didn't just make someone smile, it reinforced the whole fabric holding that world together. That's why this particular moment stuck with me, because it wasn't really about the present, it was about what it represented. It captured the essence of how power and respect operated behind closed doors. You weren't just acknowledging the man, you were acknowledging the position, the weight, the history, the responsibility. You were saying, I understand what it takes to stand where you stand, without ever needing to say the words out loud. Men like him valued that kind of understanding more than most people would ever guess. On the outside, he looked untouchable, sharp, fearless, larger than life. But on the inside, he was surrounded by people who either wanted something from him or wanted to be him. Very few people actually saw him. Even fewer understood what it meant to carry the crown he wore. So when you gave a gift that connected to the man, not just the image, it hit differently. It wasn't about flattery, it was about recognition, and it wasn't one-sided either. Because these gifts, these gestures, these silent acknowledgments, they tied you to each other. They built bonds that went far beyond business. They shaped alliances, solidified trust, and sometimes even protected lives. In a world where every relationship had stakes, something this small could be the thing that strengthened your footing, your connection, your place in the hierarchy. Not because you were trying to move up, but because you were moving right. That's the part most people will never get. They see the headlines, the suits, the cars, the power plays. They don't see the subtlety, they don't see the quiet calculations, they don't see how something as simple as a well-chosen gift can send a ripple through the entire structure. But anyone who lived it knows the truth. The life wasn't built on loud moments. It was built on the quiet ones. And that's why that Christmas gift mattered more than anyone on the outside could ever imagine.